Welcome to Life Stories, where the people we trust most can sometimes break us in ways no enemy ever could. Imagine fighting your whole life to prove your worth, only to realize the ones you were trying to impress were never rooting for you at all. The scars they left weren't from the battles you lost, but from the moments they didn't even bother to show up. Tonight, we follow Harper Whitmore, a woman who spent years building an empire in the shadows of her family's indifference. But what happens when the forgotten daughter returns, not just to reclaim what was taken, but to rewrite the ending no one ever expected? Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about power, pain, and the quiet kind of triumph that no one sees coming until it's too late. Let's step inside Harper's world, where every memory cuts like a blade, and every choice could either heal or destroy what's left. The invitation landed in Harper Whitmore's inbox like a shard of glass, slicing open a wound she had spent years trying to forget. Subject: Save the date. Annual Whitmore Family Beach House Reunion. The exclamation mark stung more than the message itself. Harper reread the email, her thumb hovering over the delete button, but her heart couldn't help but pause. Same beach house, same traditions, same silent omission. They hadn't forgotten her. They simply hadn't cared enough to make space. Outside her office window, the Manhattan skyline glittered like a cruel reminder. 35 stories up, senior vice president by 34, and yet, all the titles and glass-walled offices in the world couldn't shield her from that one brutal truth. She was still the outsider. Another bomb from the Whitmore clan? Chase's voice floated over her cubicle wall, casual yet warm. Harper forced a smile. Just family being family. That's not just family, Chase said, leaning against the wall. That's a battlefield disguised as a brunch invitation. Harper laughed, but it was hollow. She turned back to her screen, the cursor blinking against the words she couldn't bring herself to erase. Memories flooded in. July 4ths on the beach, Christmas mornings by the giant oak tree, laughter and bonfires. And always Harper, somehow, on the outside looking in. She thought of the summer she turned 12, the exact moment she understood she would never quite fit. Her sister Madison had been praised for her budding interest in law, her brother Blake encouraged in his entrepreneurial projects. Even her parents, Linda and Robert Whitmore, had been stars in their small-town social circles. Harper, meanwhile, had been handed a dish towel and told, "Help out in the kitchen, darling." Stay out of the way. Her phone buzzed. Avery, her oldest friend, practically family when blood had failed. Let me guess. Beach House Evite? Bingo. Harper typed back. Want to bet how long before Mom calls to say there's limited space this year? The answer came within the hour. Linda Whitmore's name flashed on her screen like a bad omen. Harper answered without emotion. Hey, Mom. Harper, sweetheart, Linda began in her syrupy voice, the kind she used with strangers and necessary evils. About the reunion. Let me guess. Harper cut in smoothly. The beach house is a bit crowded this year. Madison's kids need more rooms. Or is it Blake's latest girlfriend? Silence thickened the line. Well, you know how it is, Linda finally said, each word a tiny knife. Madison's children are at such an important age. Harper's gaze drifted to the promotion letter on her desk, the one naming her the youngest VP in the company's history. Not that they knew. Not that they cared. Yeah, Mom, she said quietly. I know exactly how it is. After hanging up, Harper found herself drifting toward Donovan's office. Her mentor, her real family in a world built on merit, not bloodlines. Family? Donovan guessed as she sank into the chair opposite him. She nodded, feeling the familiar weight pressing against her ribs. You could cut them off, you know, he said gently. And be what? She asked. A daughter without a family? Donovan's smile was kind but unyielding. Maybe it's time they see the daughter they chose to forget. That night, Harper didn't cry. She didn't drink. She didn't even scream into the void like she used to. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up a real estate listing she had been quietly monitoring. Whitmore Beach Estate. The market had been cruel to sentimental relics. The sprawling Victorian home was now a distressed property, too expensive to maintain, too beloved to let go. Harper ran the numbers in her head like a seasoned strategist. And for the first time in years, a slow, dangerous smile curved her lips. Not revenge, she told herself. Justice. The next few weeks unfolded like a meticulously crafted chess game. She closed the Richardson merger, secured the Hong Kong promotion, and in one decisive move, bought the Whitmore Beach estate through a shell corporation. No Whitmore would see it coming. Yet when the keys were handed to her, Harper hesitated. They felt too heavy in her palm, weighted with every dismissal, every forgotten birthday, every painful holiday. "You sure about this?" Avery asked, watching her with a wary eye. "Positive," Harper said, although her heart pounded like a fist against glass. The beach house was no longer just wood and stone. It was a battlefield. And this time, she wasn't walking in unarmed. The Friday before the reunion, Harper arrived first. She unlocked the heavy oak doors and stepped into the house of her childhood. The creaking floors, the sun-faded photographs, the smell of sea salt still trapped in the walls. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected. A letter slipped through the mail slot. Handwritten, no return address. She picked it up cautiously, the paper trembling between her fingers. "Harper, if you're reading this, then you've already made your move. And good for you. But be careful. You're not the only one playing a long game." The signature was smudged, but the initials were clear. M.W. Madison Whitmore. A chill ran down Harper's spine. Suddenly, she wasn't just fighting for justice. She was stepping into a deeper, darker game. One she hadn't even known was being played. Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who never believed in you? What would you do if your family secretly saw you as the enemy all along? As the sun dipped behind the waves, Harper realized the real reunion hadn't even begun, and the next move might cost more than she ever intended to pay. Continue to part 2. Harper stood in the center of the Whitmore Beach Estate's grand living room, the letter trembling in her hand. The familiar smells of salt and cedar swirled around her, but the comfort they once offered had curdled into something heavier, more dangerous. Madison's warning echoed in her mind, twisting with every memory that had brought her here. She stared out at the ocean beyond the tall bay windows, the sun bleeding into the horizon like a slow, reluctant surrender. The house was hers now, every inch of it, yet it suddenly felt less like a triumph and more like a fortress under siege. The rumble of tires on gravel snapped her back. They were here. Through the rippled glass, she watched the caravan of familiar SUVs pulling into the driveway, the Whitmores still believing they were the rightful monarchs of this crumbling kingdom. Madison stepped out first, perfectly polished in a white blazer, her posture rigid, a general arriving at a battleground she didn't know she'd already lost. Harper's heart slammed against her ribs, but she steadied herself. This was the plan. This was the moment. The front door rattled. Confused voices carried through the heavy wood. "Mom, my key's not working." Madison's voice, sharp and demanding. "That's ridiculous. Try yours, Blake." More fumbling, more frustration, then silence. Harper moved to the door, heels clicking purposefully on the hardwood, and swung it open. Their faces were a painting she would carry with her forever. Confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. "Looking for these?" Harper held up a set of old keys, letting them dangle from her finger before dropping them into a decorative bowl with a clatter. "They don't work here anymore." Linda's hand flew to her chest. Robert's face drained of color. "What is this?" Madison demanded. "What are you doing in our house?" Harper smiled, slow and razor-sharp. "My house." The words hung there, heavy and undeniable. Inside the living room, under the vaulted ceilings and family portraits that had once excluded her, Harper laid out the deed, the bank receipts, the foreclosure notices, all in order, all devastatingly real. "You bought it?" Robert's voice cracked. "Through my corporation," Harper said evenly. "Clean, legal, binding." Madison's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you tell us? When was the last time any of you listened?" Harper's voice remained calm, but inside, her heart was a storm. "I spent years knocking on doors you never opened. I finally found one that did, and it happened to be yours." Silence swallowed the room. It was Blake, of all people, who finally spoke, his tone more bewildered than accusatory. Why would you even want this place? Harper's throat tightened, a war she wasn't ready to fight raging inside her. Because once, a long time ago, she had loved it here. Before she learned love was conditional. Maybe to remember, she said, softer now. Or maybe to remind you what it feels like to be left outside. Madison stepped forward, her smile brittle. You think this makes you the winner, Harper? You're still you. You're still the girl who was never enough. Something inside Harper splintered, but it didn't break. No, she said, I'm the woman you never saw coming. Avery appeared behind her then, carrying a tablet. Sorry to interrupt the touching family moment, she said, her voice like velvet over steel, but Harper, you should see this. Confused, Harper crossed to Avery and glanced at the screen. Her heart lurched. It was a news alert. Whitmore Holdings, under federal investigation for financial misconduct. Harper's eyes shot up to Madison, who flinched almost imperceptibly. What did you do? Harper whispered. Madison's facade cracked just for a second. It's complicated. Harper's hands curled into fists. Complicated like letting the family drown in debt while you embezzled company funds to keep your perfect life afloat? We had no choice, Madison snapped. Without that money, we would have lost everything. You lost everything the moment you decided I wasn't worth standing beside. Harper's voice shook with fury and sorrow. Robert stumbled backward, finding the arm of the worn leather sofa, his face gray. Linda sat heavily into an armchair, her voice barely a breath. Is it true? Neither Madison nor Blake answered. Their silence was damning enough. For years, Harper had chased their approval like a starving child chasing scraps. But now she realized the truth. They had built their entire world on sand, on illusion, on selective loyalty. She had built hers on stone. Avery's voice was low, almost reverent. The investigators are saying the estate might be seized as collateral if the Whitmore assets are frozen. Madison's face twisted in fury. You're enjoying this. Harper looked at her sister and saw not an adversary, but a broken woman trapped by her own choices. For the first time, pity fluttered somewhere deep inside her chest. No, Harper said quietly, I'm mourning it. Because despite everything, despite the cruelty, the exclusion, the betrayal, somewhere, some part of Harper still wanted to believe family could be more than shared blood and broken promises. But some things, once shattered, could never be put back together. What would you do if the people you once loved turned out to be the architects of their own destruction? As the night deepened over the Whitmore Beach estate, Harper realized that winning sometimes felt just as hollow as losing, and the real battle was only beginning. Stay tuned for part 3. Here's the exact text you provided. The morning broke gray and heavy over Whitmore Beach estate, the air thick with the lingering weight of last night's revelations. Harper sat alone on the back deck, a worn coffee mug in her hands, the ocean's endless pulse rising and falling beneath the cliffs. Inside the house was quiet, too quiet. The Whitmores had scattered to nearby hotels after the confrontation, leaving behind half-packed suitcases, awkward silences, and the faint trace of broken illusions. Harper wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The victory she had envisioned, the moment of triumph she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, tasted strangely hollow now. She had won the battle. The house was hers. The truth had been dragged into the light. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small, raw ache refused to let her rest. The screen door creaked behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Robert Whitmore stepped onto the deck, his movements slow, almost fragile. In the soft light of morning, her father looked smaller somehow, like time had finally caught up to him. Mind if I sit? He asked. Harper nodded without speaking. For a long moment, they simply sat there, the only sound between them the steady, ancient heartbeat of the waves below. You know, Robert said finally, his voice low, I always thought if I ignored the cracks long enough, they'd heal themselves. I thought if I kept the family looking perfect on the outside, it would somehow fix the emptiness inside. Harper stared at the horizon, blinking against the sting in her eyes. You didn't just ignore the cracks, Dad. You widened them. He nodded slowly, as if the truth weighed too much to resist anymore. And now everything's broken anyway. They sat in silence again, not as enemies, but as two people standing amid the wreckage of a life they had both helped destroy, one through action, the other through silence. "I never knew how to love you properly," Robert whispered. "You weren't easy for me to understand. Madison Blake, they followed the script. You tore it up and wrote your own." Harper let out a small, bitter laugh. "You made me feel like that was wrong." "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm proud of the woman you became." It was almost enough. Almost. But Harper had learned that some things, no matter how sincere the apology, could never be undone. "I'm leaving today," she said, setting her empty mug down. "Singapore needs me, and honestly, I need a fresh start." Robert nodded again slowly. "Will you ever come back?" Harper thought of the beach house, the memories, the bloodline that tethered her to a family she had never truly belonged to. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe one day. But it won't be for the house. It won't be for the memories. It'll be for myself." A tear slid down Robert's weathered cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Standing, Harper turned toward the house, toward the final goodbyes she owed no one but would offer anyway, because she was no longer a prisoner of the past. She was something else now, something they could no longer define or diminish. Inside, she found Linda packing the last of their things. Her mother glanced up, her eyes rimmed red. "You don't have to go," Linda said quickly, too quickly. "We could. Rebuild." Harper shook her head gently. "Mom, we can't rebuild what was never really there." Linda flinched, and Harper hated herself a little for saying it. But it was the truth, and maybe, just maybe, facing it was the first step toward something honest between them. "I wish we had been stronger," Linda whispered. "I wish you had tried," Harper replied softly. They stood there for a moment, two women separated by a lifetime of unspoken words. Without another word, Harper picked up her suitcase and headed for the door. Avery was waiting outside, leaning against the car with her arms crossed, sunglasses shielding her eyes. "Ready to blow this place?" Avery asked. Harper smiled, tired but genuine. "More than ready." As she slid into the passenger seat, she allowed herself one last look at the Whitmore Beach estate. The house stood against the cliff's edge, proud and battered, a monument to everything beautiful and broken about the past. They pulled away slowly, the tires crunching over gravel. Halfway down the coastal road, Avery broke the silence. "You sure you're okay?" Harper watched the scenery blur past. The rugged cliffs, the endless ocean, the impossible sky. "No," she said, "but for once, that's okay." Because healing wasn't about pretending the wounds had never been there. It was about carrying them without letting them define you. The city faded behind them, the ocean giving way to highways and airports and futures untold. At the departure gate, Harper turned to Avery. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Avery asked. "For reminding me that the family we build is just as real as the family we're born into." Avery pulled her into a hug. "Go change the world, Whitmore." And Harper did. As she boarded the plane, she glanced once more at the sunrise slicing across the tarmac, fierce and beautiful. She thought of the letter Madison had left, of the family crumbling under the weight of its own lies, of the house she had saved, not for them, but for herself. Some stories didn't end in perfect reconciliation. Some scars didn't fade. But some journeys, some rare, hard-won journeys, were beautiful exactly because of their imperfection. Harper smiled as the plane lifted into the sky, carrying her toward the life she had fought so hard to claim, a life no one could ever take away. How did this story make you feel? Did Harper's journey touch something deep inside you, too? If you loved this story, comment 100 below to let us know. Also, where are you watching from? Tell us your country. Share this video with friends who need a little inspiration today. Thank you for watching Life Stories.